Oh, yep, there's smoke coming out.
This time on Low Buck Garage, I buy a new vehicle and evaluate the condition.
That is an impressive amount of wear on that water pump. The padding on the bottom's a little sparse.
Do some repairs.
Get those studs out of the way.
And then this happens.
I have way too much stuff in too little space. So a few videos back, I fixed the space problem by buying more. So now I need to take some of this stuff and move it there. I got the Dodge Diesel, that'll haul stuff easy. But the stuff I have is heavy and it needs to be loaded. But don't worry, I've got a forklift. So loading it's taken care of, hauling it's taken care of, where to put it's taken care of. The only question I have is how do I unload it? So the only logical conclusion was to buy another forklift. This just came off the trailer a few minutes ago. Let's take a look and see what we got. The most important thing and the reason I bought it was that. This has a front axle where the forks are, a drive shaft, but then a transfer case, and a rear drive shaft, and a rear driven axle. That is a four-wheel drive forklift. Now that could be interesting. You may have noticed it actually drove itself off the trailer. So this is actually a running and driving forklift. I did have to pay slightly over scrap value for it, but not a whole lot. Now the seller did tell me that this unit needs work. He said something along the lines of it needs everything end to end or top to bottom or something like that. He started listing off things wrong with it, but the list got really long and I stopped paying attention. I figured it'd be easier to just buy it and then figure out what's wrong with it. The seller said he wants the gas tank back and his straps. And it's on some nice wood blocks. I probably should give those back too. This thing's supposed to have 4 tires like that on it. And I need to give back these dually wheels. Now I've got to move this to where I can take a good look at it, preferably close to wrenches, which means I have to figure out how to drive it. Now I got a rundown from the previous owner. This is a shift lever for a 4-speed transmission. Mass controls here. These pedals, one is forward, one is backwards. Apparently has some sort of shuttle shift transmission. Never used one of those before, but I'm about to. That pedal is brake, doesn't work. I don't know if it even has a throttle. He didn't mention that part. Now this is a gravity feed fuel system, so it's just constantly coming down. There's a valve here to keep it from flooding. So we turn on our gravity here. Ignition keys right here, already in the ignition, so we're good there. So let's give this thing a shot. Key. I guess we'll just try turning it and see what happens. Okay. That's good. You press this pedal, you go backwards. Hey. You press this pedal, that makes it go forward. More pedal gives you more throttle. That is up and down. Wow, that's wiggly. There's our tilt. It's got a side shift. Oh, we're leaking. The side shift cylinder does not look happy. It also is bent. Overall, my first impression is very good. Not sure what gear I was in, but it was in one of them that worked, so that's fine. Now the seating comfort is very good. It's like one of those modern cars with the ventilated seats. The padding on the bottom's a little sparse, but not too bad. Oh, hey. Free screwdriver. Wonder what this is supposed to operate. I was told this right here is supposed to connect that carburetor, so something like that, up to that air filter way up there. If I do want air filtration, I'll need to hook this up. Also heard about this one. This is the fan belt. Apparently having the fan belt off is a performance improvement. I guess the water pump is so bad, taking this off made the engine work better. That is an impressive amount of wear on that water pump. I could see some issues there. There is an alternator on it. Obviously with no fan belt on it, that doesn't really do much. It's always a good sign when a vehicle comes with its own funnel. That means something leaks. Now it has a tow bar here. Lots of weight stacked up here. And it looks like we have full hydraulic steering. The engine might have some oil leaking somewhere. Oh, yep, there's smoke coming out. Oh, that's a good sign. It looks like this engine is self-rust proofing, so I'll never have to worry about that block rusting out. That's got a good coating on it. Particularly wet down there, right below the distributor. It's an oil type distributor where you have to oil your bearings. Got to remember to do that. There's a good little outlet on the radiator hose. I guess that's why you can check your coolant temperature if you had a water pump that worked. The battery's conveniently located right on the fender. Gravity does fine on that, even over bumps. You'll notice that little tag in the battery. The previous owner brought the battery in to be tested, so I can be assured that it is a bad battery, and the next step is replace the battery. Got another tie down that's been here for a while, but we'll add it to my dirty tie-down collection. Maybe it's to keep it from rattling. These cracks appear to be just cosmetic, because this tire appears to be holding air. Oh, hey, check out those lug nuts. That's a good sign there. Because I noticed the tires seem to tilt a little bit. I was worried there might be something wrong with the axle. But it's just that the tire's falling off because none of the nuts are attached. That's a good sign. That means that by tightening them, it might go straight. Apparently these forklifts were not supposed to have dual wheels on the front. It's supposed to have those tires on the front also. But this one appears to have lugged. Oh, that one's kind of loose. That one looks tight. That one looks mangled. That one's missing. I'm going to need more of these axle flange bolts. Looks like this is where the master cylinder is supposed to attach. Way out here in front of the vehicle. That's better. That tire looks like it might have a little bit of an air retention issue. Oh, this one actually looks like it has all 8 lug nuts and they work. That's looking promising. I guess that's for easy removal. Might need to replace that one someday. Not anytime soon though. The actual forks are guided on the inside of these C-channels and held in place by some rollers that roll along. There's one of the rollers. Well, that one's even better. That might cause some of the looseness I saw. We've got a good amount of anti-rust on this cylinder too. Looks like that front seal's leaking on this one. We got a loose panel. What's under here? Now that's the transfer case. That's a pretty big unit. Apparently moving this lever moves that. Looks like there's a bolt holding it in place. What happens when we remove that bolt? We pull that out. Now. Oh yeah. I guess this is a safety. Maybe. Not really sure. Never had one like this before. What's this? That looks like hydraulic fluid. Oh, stray bolt. That'll come in handy. I wonder if this is the original fuel tank. Doesn't really come off easy. Oh yeah. There's a sender. That's definitely a fuel tank with a level sender. That means it had a fuel level gauge at one point. Not anymore though. That always reads the same temperature even when cold. I don't really believe it. I don't believe that one either. The gauge shows the oil pressure to be 10 psi even when it's not running. That's fantastic oil pressure. Now this side of the engine looks pretty clean. I don't see any rust proofing on the lower part. Just a little on the upper part here. The oil filter has a date of 2022 on it. It's only been a little over a year since the oil's been changed. This thing is like a picture of maintenance. Now this is the stuff I really want to see. That looks like a pretty decent size axle. And that's connected to the transfer case. There's where the fuel line used to go. And we have the transfer case, and then that'll connect to the other axle. Looks like the engine is rust proofing this area also. You can see the U-joint's very well lubricated. And there's a pivot. So this whole axle assembly will actually twist and articulate to keep the tires on the ground. So this thing probably has really good traction. Huh. The steering axle is a Dana 70. Those do look beefy. It's a closed knuckle axle, which does limit the turning radius a little bit, but oh well, it's still four-wheel drive. That's a little weird. One of the U-bolts that holds the axle on has a bunch of nuts just stacked all the way around it, and a bunch of nuts underneath this. Wonder if that U-bolt was too long and they just decided to add spacers. Here's the brake backing plate for a set of drum brakes, but there's no actual drum in there. That might reduce the braking ability a little. But since we have no master cylinder, that doesn't matter at all. As usual, I did absolutely no research before buying this, and I don't even know who made this. The person I bought it from thought it might be KDC, but he wasn't sure either. Looks like most of the mechanical stuff might be Ford-like things. If you've ever seen one like this, let me know. I'd like to know more about them and how to fix them. It's nice having a valve in this gravity feed system. When you have to give the tank back, that's very handy. This will help me take off the hood though. That exhaust goes through the hood and is welded on. That looks pretty rusty. Well, the fellow I got this from came by to pick up his gas tank. He never had the hood off, ever. So we popped that off so we could look at it. He also brought me a pile of goodies. And among the pile was a bunch of tires. This one's the wrong size and has a plug in it, but it could work as a spare. This one has a rim that'll work. The tire looks decent, but the beads aren't set and it leaks. This one actually holds air and might bolt on. This is one of the original tires from this machine with a nice thick heavy duty rim, but it doesn't hold air. This one's actually a brand new tire. So new, it still has the size on the tread. And it's on a rim that'll bolt on, but it doesn't hold air. I'm trying to figure out why this brand new tire is flat, because usually new tires are pretty good at holding air. Probably an opening, either at the bead, didn't seat right, or at the valve stem. Yep, it's the valve stem. See all those bubbles forming? There's our leak. Now this is a bolt-in style valve stem. There's a slim chance that just tightening this up will fix it. I'm gonna give that a minute and see if any bubbles form. Right now, I don't see any. Well, now with the hood off, we can see things a little better. The condition of the water pump has not improved, but that's okay. My friend also brought me a brand new water pump, and it doesn't look exactly right, but I think it's close enough we can make it work. And already we're winning. Got the last bolt out, and we didn't break off anything in the block. That's always good. The water pumps look pretty similar. It looks like the bolt onto the block the same, and the height of the pulley from the surface is about the same. So I think I can bolt this one in and have it work. The fan mount is totally different. This one used a big spacer. The bolt circle was way smaller, but the distance of that spacer and this one look about the same. I just have to find a fan that bolts to this one and I should be in good shape. Might be possible to drill new holes in the original one, but let me look in my used fan blade stash first. Gotta be something in here. Worst case scenario, I could go electric, but let's see. Ooh, that one's got a big circle on it. Huh, one of these ones that had a fan clutch on it, that might be the right bolt circle too. I'll grab a couple of these, we'll try them out. Now this fan is bigger than the original one, but not big enough. That's over 3 inches across. This one is pretty close. That is super close. I might be able to sneak those bolts in there. I think we have a winner here. The new water pump had no gasket, so I'm going to use the old one as a template to make a new gasket. I pulled off the old gasket. It only went halfway down. I'll just trim off the bottom edge here. We got a gasket. fancy gold water pump is in. Now the big question, will it hold coolant? It's kind of a neat warning on the cap. A visual way to represent pressure maybe? It's like a regular radiator cap on the bottom side. We're going to put some coolant in this and see if it stays. There could be a problem with this block, like a cracked head, that I never saw because there was no coolant there. I want to try this pump out, but I don't have any fuel in the engine because I gave back the fuel tank. Just took an old pulley, put it on a worn out 1/2-inch bolt. Looks like that's going to work. We're purging the air out of our system too. So I'll top it back off and then we should be all set. I realized I should check if the diameter of this fan works. It's a little bigger than the other one. What does it run into? Oh yeah, this will not work. The fan blade hits the lower radiator outlet. Scratch that idea. I realize I never actually checked the oil in this. It's probably worth doing. Not only to see where the oil level is, but also to see if it goes up now that I have coolant in there. Because if there is an internal crack in the cooling system, then it'll show up as a high oil level because the oil will be floating on top of it. Alright, we're about 1/4 of the way up. In the meantime, I gotta figure out how to get a belt on that water pump. There is a hydraulic pump here, which is driven off a belt, but there also is a hydraulic pump right there. And that pump is driven through a shaft right off the front of the engine. And the reason that matters is you can't take a belt on and off without removing that shaft. Try to undo these bolts and the engine turns over. I can't get an impact in there. I'm going to try the manual impact method. That's working. There is a spline here. Hopefully that can slide enough on the spline to let me sneak a belt through. That slides, but the shaft is almost touching. No luck there. I'm going to see if I can gain some wiggle room by unbolting that hydraulic pump. Well, that gave me some clearance. See that shiny bit of shaft? That means that coupler's loose. It's a good thing this belt is so difficult to put on, because I never would have seen this loose coupler otherwise. And now I have all the clearance I need. I can see why the old fan belt was cut. Let's use this as a size and dig through my old belt collection. And that belt is not long enough. Nope, too big. Oh, just a hair too small. I couldn't find any of my belts that would fit, so I looked up the number on the belt that was on here. A local parts store had it in stock for $8. Hopefully, I'll never have to do this again. That one fits just right. Belts are all on. Now I just got to hook up that hydraulic pump. You know, I'm wondering if I should give this a test fire before I hook up that hydraulic pump, in case anything goes wrong over here. Let's check that oil. Looks like we haven't really gained any fluid in the crankcase, and that's good. Also, the coolant is at the same level I left it, so that's good too. I found an old fuel pump in my pile of parts. That side clearly has a plus on it, so positive, and that side has the red wire. Let's see if this thing works. I'm going to take the red and go to negative, hit the black on positive. That makes the right sounds. Let's see if it pumps anything. I found a fuel filter in my stash that looks only slightly used and pretty clean, so I figured that'll be perfect. Gotta get the old fuel line off it. It's not quite the right size, but we'll see if we can get it to work. There we go. That'll be a nice tight seal. Shouldn't have any leaks there. I was working on trying to wire up the fuel pump, and I knocked off a bit of grease, and there's a number under there. I don't see a manufacturer's name anywhere around, but I got the serial number. Well, I found a hole in the dash to run the wire out, but I need that wire to go that way. So I tied it to the end of a piece of threaded rod. I'm going to use that to fish it through. Here's my threaded rod. And here's my wire. Now I'm keeping fishing around the transmission. Where that fuel line goes through is where I want it to go. I've got the fuel pump secured with its hoses and the ground wire jammed under a nearby bolt. So I think we're pretty much ready to try this out. You guys keep an eye on the fuel. I'm going to turn on the ignition. That fuel pump wasn't picking up fuel at all, so I decided to prime it. With a boat tank, that's easy. You just lift up and tilt. There we go. I just learned something. The bolts that hold on that hydraulic pump are the same ones that hold on that pulley. Now the pulley's actually bolted on, let's try this again. think I'm gonna call that one a win for tonight. Gonna try to make some kind of adapter for this muffler so I can take it on and off easy. I've got my pile of miscellaneous exhaust stuff here. Oh, that's promising. That's got the step in it. Got a slit on either side now. See if we can tap this in this end. See how it fits. That seems pretty reasonable. Now I was putting this hydraulic pump back in and I noticed this. Looks like the corner of the radiator is going through the high pressure line. Cut a little piece of sheet metal. I'm going to give it a little bit of a curve here. I'm going to slide that over this hose. Now I'm tightening this back down and I think that'll clamp it in place. That's not going anywhere. I'm going to add a little oil to the distributor. The exhaust didn't fall off.
I figured I'd let it warm up a bit and check the charging system. There was no charging. It did have some interesting bubbles coming out the side of the engine though. We're going to ignore those for now. The cooling system seemed to be working fine, but the gauge did not.
That one hasn't moved. It's really bothering me that everyone is loose and the rim's been wobbling around, destroying the rim and destroying the studs. Now the fellow I got this from knows better than to do this, which means there's something wrong in here. They all flop around. That explains the problem. When you try to turn the nuts, the bolts just spin. I think I'm going to put the weight back on it. Hopefully that'll keep some of the bolts from spinning as I undo them. 1, 2, spins, 3, that one just spins. Let's get these out of the way. Luckily, the brake drum is missing on this side too, so I was able to sneak in there with a pair of vice grips and grab the head of the stud with the vice grips. Another one. So far I've had the best luck with rolling the wheel around until the one I want to work with is up on the top, angling the bottom out so it's not on the shoulder of the hub, and letting the weight down to hold the bolts sideways. And that locks them down pretty good so far. I only got 2 to go. There's one of them. And there's the other one. Now we can look at the damage. Get those studs out of the way. Those have a little bit of wear to them. A few new shapes. Now I'm looking at this backing plate. It looks like a complete backing plate for a regular drum brake system, but absolutely everything is missing. Maybe the axles came with a backing plate from the factory and the hardware was never installed from the factory, or someone did a real good job of removing absolutely everything. If you think if they were just stealing the drum, some of the hardware would still be floating around. Probably should take care of that. That's loose. It is the steering. It's kind of useful. Now I've got a box of Jeep suspension stuff for a project I haven't got to yet, but in the bottom I have some new studs. Let's see if these might work. I already have them. As I recall, I bought the cheapest ones I could find. They're not quite right, but let's see if we can make them work. One reason these were not going to work for what I wanted to do was these serrations are way too long. Even in this application, they'll stick out around 1/8 of an inch, which is perfect because I'm going to move them backwards 1/8 of an inch. Because I have an idea about the retention issue. I'm going to take this piece of flat stock, happens to be 1/8 inch thick, put it across 2 holes and mark the location. Now I can take these plates and slide the studs through them, then I can slide in pairs for the holes. Now I've got a couple of greased up washers I'm going to put on here to act as thrust bearings. I'm going to tap through the lug nuts to clean up the threads. Now I've got all the studs replaced, but I don't really trust the retention. Those holes are pretty worn out. Those studs are rocking around quite a bit. So the center is tight, but the ends aren't particularly tight. But I'm not worried because I made these plates. And there's one more step to installing those. I've welded the heads of the studs to these plates. So there's absolutely no way those studs can turn because they're connected to the one next to them. And if I need to replace them, I still can drive them out. I just have to do it in pairs. I'm going to put this tire on it because I thought it held air. Then I noticed this hole in it. That is not good for air retention. I'm just going to throw a plug in it and see what happens. It's not like it's going to get any worse. It's a pretty tough tire. It's not actively leaking. That's something. Now, this hub gets an A for wheel retention. Now, a few months ago, I had to meet a minimum order quantity in order to get free shipping. So I actually bought the correct size fan for this truck. It's been sitting on my workbench ever since. But I need to install it right now. I want the old one off this. A small plastic fan blade. It's a little too small for this truck, but it might be perfect for a forklift. I just added the extra holes to mount to that adapter. The fan is on. I got the shroud on. The clearance actually isn't too bad. I think it'll be okay. The fan blades go just inside the shroud right where they should be. So that's all set. It's a little unwieldy. I decided to give this exhaust now outlet a little bit of rain protection. That'll do. When I was working on the studs, I noticed a little bit of wiggle here. That's not a good sign. Hopefully it's just a loose nut, otherwise it might have bearing issues. As loose as everything is, it's awfully stuck. Hopefully you can see that on camera, but it is definitely wiggling on that pinion shaft. Yeah, it's pretty much finger tight, so that's not a good thing. But it is a good thing because just tightening it might fix the problem. No more wiggle. A lot of backlash, but that's pretty easy to ignore. The bearing thing, that worried me a little bit. I'm not sure what the torque spec is, but I figure it's a lot. And I only can do so much from down here, so I'm just gonna do a lot. That's probably good. That's much better. Now only the U-joint is wobbly, and those are meant to be disposable, so that's fine. I also got the old master cylinder. It doesn't work, but I recognized it right away. There's one right there. There's another one. I'm pretty familiar with that style. I've got a spare one on the shelf, so that problem's already solved. Got the master cylinder installed. I'm gonna hook up the line, but I'm noticing it's completely clogged. So I'm gonna take the extra step and actually clear that out first before hooking it up.
I tried to clear out that line by blowing air backwards through a bleeder. No luck.
Since I couldn't clear out this line, I started following it. It looks like it goes to that bleeder. And then there's another one. I'm not sure what that unit is. It's obviously more than a distribution block. If there's a bleeder on it, it probably needs to be bled. So I'll crack that open and see what kind of fluid comes out. It definitely is a bleeder, but nothing's coming out. Let's try putting air in here. Let's hook this thing up and see what happens. I'm gonna get both of these mostly in by hand and then tighten them down. The old fitting cracked when I was trying to install it. So let's see if we can replace that. Got my replacement 90-degree fitting. I can put this in and I'll be back in business. But I want to show you one thing before I do this. These 90-degree fittings have an issue. If you go to install them, and you grab them with a wrench, and you go to turn them, notice the wrench is right near this really thin spot of metal. If you turn them too tight, you can actually crush that in and ruin the fitting. I hate to admit it, but I've done that to good fittings before and ruined them. There's two ways around this. The first thing is make sure the wrench goes near the bottom, where the wide section of metal is. The other way is install a fitting. If you have spare fittings lying around, just put one in. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and install the brake line fitting. Now I'm going to install this fitting on top of that one. Now I can grab this bottom fitting wherever I want and just tighten up the top one, because the top one has plenty of strength. And we got a brake system. Now everyone will tell you to make sure you use brake fluid that is coming from a sealed container, because once it's opened it might get moisture in from the air, and it's still raining slightly. I really think the fact this valve's been opened already is a minor issue. Huh. Feels like we have a pedal. Shouldn't have that. Oh, there we go. Now it's going somewhere. I'm gonna start going through these bleeders one by one. Oh, there we go. Kind of muddy. We're just gonna do a few pumps and get some of that out of there. Got a bunch of gook out of that bleeder. Oh, I don't see any air there. Let's move on to the next one. I'm up here pumping the brake pedal on this forklift. I noticed another important benefit of this seat over my other forklift. This seat is nice and comfy with plenty of padding, but after it rains, you don't want to sit on that for a while. On this seat, the drainage is excellent. Bleeding the brakes doesn't seem to be working particularly well, so I'm just going to try driving it to see if anything happens. Hydraulic tank looks really low. I think I know what that funnel is for. Starts good. My clacker pump stopped clackering. Thought at first it was this ground, because it's a little questionable. Now you can see the sparks there. It's definitely making contact. So that pump is just not working, which is a good thing. It made me go through my stash a little more, and I found this pump. And this one has mounting feet. I had no way to hold it down. So this is gonna be an upgrade. Got the new used pump in, bolted down securely, even bolted the ground in. We have a big upgrade here. Now let's see if it works. Much better. I didn't even have to prime it.
The brakes barely worked at all, so I figure it was time to try top gear. I doubt I'll ever have a use for that gear again.
Now this is the only wheel I was able to bleed the wheel cylinder on, and it felt like I was getting a little bit of brakes, so I'm going to start here. Okay, those are all different size. Nice. I was able to unbolt 6 out of 8 lug nuts, and the other 2 don't matter because they're already missing. Whole stud too. On the axle shaft, we have 1 bolt missing, 4 bolts finger tight. Oh, there's oil in there. That's a good sign. At some point, someone took a chisel to this nut. Using the right socket doesn't work anymore. But the wrong way probably will. Getting somewhere. That looks awfully familiar. This is a Ford version. It looks exactly identical to the Dana 70 I worked on my Dodge just in the last video. And I bet the parts will interchange. So let's see what I need. Here is one of the hold down springs for that shoe. This one looks okay. We're missing 2 studs in this drum completely. Here they are. That one's a little wiggly. Now, let's see if that wheel cylinder works. It's definitely moving. That adjuster is closed up all the way. Let's go steal some parts. Never even tighten these bolts down. There's all the parts I need. Looks like this has never been adjusted. That's in the fully closed position. There we go. I also popped off this cap, added a little oil in there too. And now we'll be able to adjust our brakes. One stolen spring. Now I need to fix the stud issue here. Luckily, the previous owner gave me a coffee can full of wheel studs. And 2 of them are new. Now 3 of these fit fine. I need to replace 1 more, but it basically drops in all the way on its own. So that one's not going to stay well. We need to make this a little bit bigger. If you want to hit something that's round, it tries to move around normally. Close the vice jaws to just slightly smaller than the diameter, and that gives it a groove to sit in. And then it'll stay in place. There. Now by making those deeper, we pushed up material around them. Let's see how it fits. Whoever did this last really went after this nut. That wasn't just a chisel. There's all sorts of things that hit this. But I smoothed it out a little bit so my socket will fit. Now I can put this back together a lot easier. We're getting close here. Stealing the bolts out of the other axle again, because they seem better. I'm not using that one right now anyway. Now let's go with the tire that's supposed to be on here. I'm going to tackle this side. It does have all 8 lug studs, so that's a bonus. All the lug nuts came off, so that's good. Now this is the perfect time to look at the brakes. I got the bleeder open, but I didn't get a single drop of fluid out of it. So I know there's no fluid going to the wheel cylinder. I'd follow the line back a little bit. It goes back to this little cylinder. That's where I bled the master cylinder. There's another bleeder on the other end. I never got any fluid out of that one either. Now I'm not sure what that cylinder does at all. I've never seen one before, but clearly it does more than just be a T-fitting. A couple of possibilities I thought of where it somehow is proportional, so depending on which way you're steering, it does braking better on that side, or maybe some kind of power booster. I have really no idea. So I'm thinking the problem's in that unit, and I only get fluid to this tire, and I'm not getting to anything to this one. There's no point in taking apart the brakes. They might actually work once that little thing starts working. And then I'm just going to put the wheel on. And we'll hope this side fixes itself while I drive it. I want to attach the air filter, but I'm going to go all out and check and make sure there's nothing living in it that's going to get sucked into the engine if I do hook it up. That looks fine. No problems there. Well, while I got it out, I'm going to do an air filter rebuild. Probably about 25% as good as new. Should probably clean out the tube too. I'm glad I did that. Just found out what this baling wire was for. That's perfect for holding that in place. When you see weird things on a vehicle, they often have a purpose. Now this is one of the original wheels and tires. The bead leaks are so bad that I can't even get it to inflate at all. I'm going to try using the chemical method of sealing here. And this one has a picture of a tractor on the back. It says for big tires to use 32 ounces. 1 pump equals 1 ounce. There we go. We're starting to fill it with goo. I've gotten bored with counting. We got the whole gallon in there. Let's see how that does. Now you're not supposed to use this to fix bead leaks, but I've done it before. It kind of worked. Got 30 psi in it. I'm not seeing any big leaks. So let's put this thing on and swirl it around in there.
The brake works. Surprisingly well.
That's when warm. No matter how far off that gauge is, that oil puncher's pretty good. Well, that's it for today. I took a running and driving forklift and turned it into a running and driving forklift, but with less damage. Because before, when you drove it with no cooling system and no brakes and the tires wobbling around, you're actually damaging it by using it. But now I can drive it around without damaging it. And I have the added bonus of a brake. So I'm calling this one a win. Now there is some more work to do. That mast in particular, I gotta get rollers for that, but I gotta get it apart and figure out what I need to order, so it's gonna take a little while to get the parts. There might be some other odds and ends I run into here and there. I have a feeling with using it and cycling the brakes, that other side might break free on its own, and ignoring it will be the best solution. So I'm gonna ignore that for now and put it to work. I've got some other projects that need to be moved around and they need a forklift. So I'm gonna go have fun doing that, and I hope you're having fun too. We'll see you next time.